Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Slipstream Entrepreneurs podcast. I'm your host, Rich Wharton, and my co-host here, Hannah Brooks. Hannah, how are you?
Morning. I'm really amazing, as always.
I am glad to hear it. That's the sort of energy we need on a Monday morning. That's brilliant. And I am delighted to welcome our special guest, Matt Bintcliffe. Matt, how are you?
Not too bad. Like you said, good for a Monday morning. The sun is shining. It's still not super warm outside, but it's a good day to talk and spend some time with you guys.
Amazing, Matt. I'm delighted to have you on here. Just for the background, and Matt will go into his story very quickly about his journey within business in motorsport, and the things he's doing in the future. But just to get the just to get this off my chest and get things moving. Obviously, Matt, you work in esports, and you have done for a fair while.
Yeah,
But we just want to tell the viewers exactly what esports is all about, but more importantly, how it should be spelt.
Yeah, so like you said, I've been in esports for a number of years. I think just under about 10 years now. Started when I was at university and sort of just built my way up. Turns out when you spend all of your time playing games competitively and with friends, that you develop a bit of a passion for it. And I sort of started doing stuff around university to grow what we were doing as friends, and then sort of that went into sort of more business sort of based stuff. So I started working for local companies on how they could engage sort of esports fans and whatever to promote their products. And yeah, grew from there. Started working with small local teams in the UK, and then eventually moved over to Alpine, where I've spent the last 3 years working for them in various sort of capacities along the world of esports and sim racing. I do have a bit of a personal grudge with how the word esports should be spelt. As we already sort of discussed, I think there are a lot of variations when it comes to how the word esports should be spelt. Now, I'm very much of the traditionalist that it should be spelt the way any word should be spelt when used in the correct sort of grammar and sentence positioning. So, if it's the start of a sentence or the word title of a word, etc., you can use a capital E. If not, keep that capital away and just keep everything lowercase. It's nice and simple. There is a little bit of a sort of, I guess, a meme and a cult phenomenon behind this. So I tend to call this out quite a lot on socials, specifically LinkedIn, where I think a lot of business people who aren't maybe as aware of the industry tend to spell it in all manner of weird, funky ways. Capital E hyphen capital S PO, whatever it is they decide to go for. So a couple of years ago I started spelling it sort of publicly with the sort of SpongeBob style meme text with the lowercase uppercase, and it's developed into a bit of an ongoing sort of inside joke within the industry that anyone who spells it wrong will be accosted by myself on how to spell it properly. And by properly, I mean absolutely horrifically, but I think it gets the point across to most people most of the time.
Absolutely. And I think with that, I mean, I'm going to have my own saying. I've just made it up in my head, and I don't know if it's any good. So this is the first time it's being aired in life, let alone publicly. But if in doubt, keep the hyphen out. That's what I'm going
for. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. Are we applying that to sim racing as well, though? Because
I'm applying it to everything.
Everything.
Gaming, esports, like your
okay.
sim racing, whatever you want to mention. Just get that hyphen out of here. We're not interested.
Just anti-hyphen over here.
Yeah, that's it. I am going to start another cult of just being anti.
Just get t-shirts made, turn up at esports events and sim racing events with if in doubt, keep the hyphen out. I like that.
100%.
That's good.
So Matt, tell us a little bit about before, obviously, Alpine. You mentioned that you've done quite a bit of work. You went to university. Tell us about university life and what your dreams and aspirations were from there.
Yeah, so I went to university to do a law degree, which I did get after many years of drinking and partying. But whilst I was at university, I joined a League of Legends team that was being ran by just some random guy, I think in first year or second year, and sort of put together a team of players. And at the beginning, it was literally just 5 of us representing our university, but unofficially, right? It was being done through like a sort of casual league of, if you're at university and you want to play competition, competitions, like there's this platform available. And so, yeah, we joined as a team of 5. We did okay, but we sort of started being like, well, there should be more support for this across the campus, and more support for this across, what we're trying to do. So we sort of campaigned with the student union. We were like, well, look, we'd really like to create an esports society where we focus on esports, and we could do watch parties, and we can organize teams and competitions and stuff. And they were a little bit skeptical. They were like, oh, well, doesn't that just fall under gaming? We already have a gaming society. And it was a little sort of political at the beginning. We had to play a game essentially where we had to sort of wait for the gaming society to not to do anything for us to then go back to the student union and be like, hey, look, it's been 3 months. They haven't organized anything with us. They've barely spoken to us. Like, let us create our own society. And so the universities are always supportive in sort of new groups and new activities. So they were like, okay, fine. Like, if you've got people interested, go ahead. And so, this small group of us, we went from five players playing a League of Legends team to the largest society on campus in a single year, which was quite an achievement. Turns out there was a lot of people interested in playing games together and watching competitive competitions. We were starting to run watch parties for CS:GO competitions, League of Legends World Finals, these sort of things. And so, whilst we had this sort of captive audience, we started speaking to local businesses and companies that were like keen to activate. If you've been to university, or if you've seen university campuses, companies come on site all the time. Domino's, Papa John's, other pizza places are available, but they come and give out free samples and stuff like that, right? So we started talking to a lot of local businesses, and they were really keen to know, like, well, you've got 300 students here. How can we leverage them? How can we give you guys a discount code on headphones or whatever to try and encourage some sales, etc. So I sort of led those conversations, and as those conversations sort of continued to develop, turns out I had a pretty good knack at sort of explaining to businesses what esports was, how they could use it for their promotions and activities. And so that sort of just started growing. When I got to my third year, I had to pick a dissertation topic, and so being a law student, I chose an esports based question. So I wrote a 20,000 word dissertation on how UK law was restricting the expansion of esports in the UK, which was a really fun but also challenging thing to research. And whilst I was researching it and learning it, there was so much crossover with sports law, because that's what a lot of traditional sports use for their legal sort of standing, was being applied to esports, because the concept is relatively similar. It's competitive, it's people doing some sort of activity against other people, and so there was a lot of that sort of stuff being applied, but not necessarily in the same way, or didn't necessarily work the same way, because esports is digital and physical sports is physical. So it was a really interesting document to write and learn about. And so from that bit onwards, I started sort of speaking to other brands and teams, and just sort of started off working, as an advisor, I guess, in that space. Sort of how can these companies or other universities amplify esports through their students, or for their students. And then that led me to work with a number of sort of small businesses and teams, and then eventually I got reached out to by someone at Alpine, just asking for a bit of information. They just this was actually pre-Alpine. It was when their partnership with Renault. Also, when they were Renault had a partnership with an esports team called Team Vitality, and I was asked just to come and sort of, I guess, not necessarily consult for the day, but just go and chat and sort of see, what the situation is and what my thoughts and feelings were with how the relationship with Vitality was and what was possible. So I went off to Enstone and spent the time with Jarno and Denozo and all the guys that were part of the Renault team, and just sort of watched them for the day. And then sort of after they left and went home, I was sort of asked to go sit, and I was given a presentation on what sim racing looked like and esports looked like for Renault. And I gave my opinion and sort of said, look, I think I would look at this, I would consider this. And they sort of said, thank you very much, off you go. And so I left, went home, and sort of, a couple of months later, I thought, no, I probably should have really pushed more to try and make that conversation into more of a job or something like that. And then the pandemic happened, and so the world sort of changed massively, and sim racing became this huge phenomenon. We didn't have any live sports, we didn't have football, tennis, but what we did have was suddenly professional F1 drivers or professional content creators, celebrities, etc., all really passionate about sim racing. They had rigs in their homes, they had the ability to connect online, and suddenly sim racing had just sort of blown up. And so I think a lot of the teams, especially F1, but wider motorsports in general, just started paying a lot more attention to that space and how they could involve their brand in it, and how they could utilize what was happening. And so Alpine put up a role for someone to come and join and sort of lead and work on the esports side. And so I sort of applied and funnily enough was selected for an interview, and went into that interview and sort of said, look, I'm really passionate about esports. I'm really passionate about competitive gaming. I'd love to do that for Alpine. And so I was thankfully and luckily, I guess, chosen for that role. And for 3 years, I worked alongside the main F1 team, but also Alpine as a car brand, the WEC team, the entire organization to bring esports to the forefront of what they were doing. It's always a challenging thing to bring a new concept. Alpine is a very historic brand, has existed for since the early mid 90s. And so to be able to showcase to them how they can use something like esports to help grow the brand and be successful was really challenging, but also really empowering, because every time you convinced a new person, or every time you put out a piece of content that like a senior, someone senior in the business really liked, that was like a good tick. It was like, yeah, they get it, they understand it. And we just had, or Alpine had just at the beginning of the year trailered a new sort of 2024 launch campaign video, and it went live on Twitch. They were streaming it. They were advertising it on not just traditional TV, like you'd see your Renault adverts or your sort of traditional car brands, but they were also then advertising it on new platforms like Twitch, and it was featuring content from the F1 team, from the WEC team, but also had gaming content in there as well. And so, for me, it was really rewarding to see that go live and say, actually, and it sounds really silly, like, oh, we got 30 seconds in a 2-minute video clip, like that doesn't sound like a lot, but actually it's about the mindset and the understanding like behind that. So yeah, fantastic 3 years with Alpine, and really excited to see how they continue to develop in that space. And then I guess, for myself, excited to see what projects and opportunities I've had. I've had some really fantastic conversations with so many people who are looking to either enter the esports space / sim racing space, or just grow what they're currently doing. And I think there's a lot of really passionate people who have discovered this passion, whether it be from the pandemic or whether it be since it started growing. There's so many live events now you can go to, and there's sim rigs there. I remember going to sort of the earlier Insomnia gaming festivals or wherever, and there'd be like one sad sort of little rig, in the sort of corner of somewhere, and it would be one or two brands, trying to sort of push that thing. It's been fantastic watching that develop, and suddenly you've now got F1 teams showing up with a fleet of simulators, and you've got big brands showing up with their with an arsenal equipped of sim rigs and everything, and those rigs themselves have gotten more and more complicated. It's not just the most basic sort of wheel and pedals attached to a console. You've now got people turning up with $8,000 liquid cooled PCs and these motion rigs that could shake a house apart. So it's really been incredible to be part of that experience and that journey, and I'm really keen to see how it continues to develop and grow for everyone in the space.
That's amazing. What a great recap as well on your career, which is vast by the sounds of it. So I've got a couple of questions then, and I want to skip back a little bit to your time at university. So I've worked in a university in the sports team, and so I see it from your perspective, and students kind of learning those skills that you obviously learned in creating what you did. Now, you spoke about when you created partnerships because of that kind of esports. So if you were to say to a potential sponsor 3 reasons as why to invest in esports now, what would they be?
Oh, 3 reasons. Okay. First one is always the community, right? The community are incredibly passionate, and the fans are dedicated and committed. And without rattling it all off, there's so many stats and sort of demographics that show, right, that gamers are more passionate about the products that are connected to their brand. They're more passionate about their targets than, say, football fans or sort of traditional motorsport fans. They have that deep-rooted connection, and it's because the content is so available, right? I'm a fan of T1. There are League of Legends and Valorant and big team over in Korea. And when they compete, I can watch them from home, but then their players also go on Twitch and stream online and they talk to fans and stuff. And you don't get that in any other sport. You can't sit at home after watching Chelsea play and watch their players speak to you on Twitch, or you can't interact with them on socials as much as they do in esports. So there's this huge community aspect, and people are really passionate to get involved. And I think the sponsorships and brands that do really well are the ones that embrace that attitude, and they get involved with the fans, and they turn up at events and they do things that make the fans go, this is why we like this brand and this is why we're engaged with them. So that, I think that's opportunity number one right there, is the community, just how big you can build it. Number two, I think, is a little bit of a weird one. The industry itself is in constant flux at the moment. We see periods of massive success, and then we sort of have downtime or quiet periods. I think if you can play those waves well, if you know when to sponsor a team, or if you know when to turn up at an event, if you can sort of play that sort of angle, then you've got a really strong opportunity to capitalize on the dip where people, other brands aren't investing in esports because it's been a cold winter or whatever term they want to say, but actually the fans are still there, the players are still there, the teams are still there. So, and that's when they're hungriest, right? And that's when you can get a good deal, or you can get a good partnership, and you can say, look, you're a relatively small team, but you've just qualified for this massive tournament. We'd love to get involved with you. You're a British team, we're a British company. Let's take you to this event in Malaysia and go and partner with you and produce content around that. And people love that content side of it, right? And I guess that's point number three. The content available to esports in general, right, is just phenomenal. The players are so keen to get involved and do things. There's so many additional options. We get so many really good behind the scenes clips. We get so many training videos or advice videos, support videos, anything like that. And again, it's a whole generation of people that understand new media. They understand TikTok or Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts. They're there streaming, they're there getting involved. There's, the influencers behind the scenes. How many of the current sort of top esports sim content creators are ex-players, right? So they have a good understanding or a good appreciation for how that industry looks anyway. And so, you can really produce some fantastic content with relatively, flexible budgets, and you can do some awesome things with passionate people. There you go, top three. That was relatively quick.
Yeah, that was a pretty good recap. Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, from your perspective, then. Sorry, Rich, I'm just jumping into the next question, but it's kind of obviously esports is a great pathway. We've spoken about this before, me and Rich. It's a pathway to those senior F1 teams potentially. So, what is your take on that? Because obviously there's a lot of financial barriers for karting and getting then further into that. So how can esports help that?
Yeah, and I think this is where the divide between something like esports and sim racing starts to become really apparent, right? Because for me, and maybe people will argue with me on this, but for me, sim racing is a category within esports, right? The same way that League of Legends is, or fighting games are, MOBAs are, FPSs, right? So esports sort of sits as the overarching thing because it's online digital gaming, right? And you can't really sort of remove that title from sim racing unless you put everyone on a stage on an offline LAN and have so it's by that point you might as well just be racing. So I think esports, sort of is the overarching word, but sim racing has gone through such a fantastic growth since COVID, and I guess even just a little bit before that. People were starting to really sort of pay attention to what was available, whether it's gaming titles like ACC or iRacing, sort of really investing in the technology behind their titles, and things like laser map scanning and stuff that we now have, which is a common practice now. If you launched a game tomorrow that didn't have laser scan tracks, people are going to really criticize you. Whereas 10 years ago, that was standard, right? No one was going to invest in all this equipment to go and scan all this stuff. So the investment from the developers has been incredible, and then the reciprocative investment from brands that are making steering wheels, making pedals, making software. Whether it's telemetry software, tracking software, all of that sort of stuff. Even the rise we've seen in tournament platforms and event organizers. We've had some really massive competition come to life over the last couple of years, and that's because that audience has continued to grow, whether it's because of the success of F1 or the success of the new WEC hypercar discipline. I'm really excited to see people being excited to race alongside the hypercars in the new Le Mans game, right? Because we've never had that before, and so being able to take these brand new top spec cars and put them to their limits and experience that is something really quite unique. And sim racing sits for me at a very different pinnacle than any other esport because it is so connected to the real world version. League of Legends, you can't just run around and be a magical fairy thing in the woods. Call of Duty or CSGO, yes, you can go paintballing, you can go whatever, but it's not exactly the same. When you're playing the game, you're tapping on keyboards. If you're out in paintballing, you're using a rifle or whatever. Whereas sim racing, the equipment that you are using, it's not one-to-one, don't get me wrong, and it'll take a long time before it is one-to-one. Let's just be realistic. But the level of accuracy we can now get from pedals, from brakes, from direct drives, etc., there is so much more overlap there. And when we have professional racing drivers like Max, like Charles, using sims on a regular basis, A, because they enjoy it, but B, because it's helping build that understanding, that muscle memory, that that strengthening just what they're used to. You can set brake pressures now to be almost as close to F1 pedals, right? And so those guys know exactly what they're looking for and feeling for. And so I think to kind of answer the question, I know I've sort of set up a sort of long sort of story to begin with, but I think that's the bit that adds the real opportunity, right? Because if you are not privileged enough to be able to go go-karting every weekend, which is incredibly expensive, it's incredibly passionate discipline, but it's not cheap, and you have to be able to afford to do that. But a sim rig can cost a fraction of that, and you can be practicing every single day. You can come home from school and jump in a rig and do 2 races. You can, after dinner, jump in another. You can spend, and I'm not saying kids should do this, like it's not necessarily healthy. The same way it's not healthy to sit and practice piano for 8 hours a day, right? Or go play football in the park for 8 hours a day. We have to be sensible with your moderation of these things. But the opportunity is to actually get those basic fundamental skills, understanding telemetry at the age of 8 compared to at the age of 16, for example. We can really see an understanding of, well, actually, they know what these changes can allow for. And, we're talking about, I can change the angle on my front wing. You try and explain to your average F1 fan, exactly what percentage of front wing you need for a certain track, and they're going to look at you like, I just want to watch cars race fast and hopefully Max doesn't win because it's boring. Like most people don't necessarily know the details, and so to be able to then take kids as young as 8, maybe even younger, to talk about these things and be passionate, and that's where that grows, right? The more passionate you are about something, the more you can continue to push it, and that's where, for me, the excitement is and the opportunity is. I do think we'll reach a point where we will get F1 world champions who have grown up sim racing. I think they'll grow up sim racing and karting, because I think that's the way you're going to be the best, right? Is just having that continued exposure. But I think we'll have people who are dedicated sim racers and can win F1 world championships or win WEC championships or Formula E championships, whatever it is. There's so much available now, and that technology is only going to get better, right? That understanding is only going to get better. With some fantastic brand. I'm not going to list all of them, but so many brands in the space are working on continuous new products. And you speak to them at events. If you go to ADAC or you go to Gamescom or you go to any sort of conference where there's these brands, they're so excited to tell you about what's coming soon. And we've got so many new people entering the space, whether it be from brands that have never done this sort of equipment before, or whether it's brands that have launched just to do this equipment. It's really cool to see it start to develop. And so for me, I think that's where the opportunity is. We've got this fantastic community of people. Sim racers are incredibly committed to the discipline, to each other, and to the space, and they all want to improve, they all want to be better, and they all want to see that pinnacle. So I think that's that's the real opportunity, right? Is to and I think that's going to be the sort of target, is like, who can be the F1 or the Max Verstappen, of sim racing, and how can we get them from a real car, or from an online car into a real car in one single go, and have them instantly be good. We did the Alpine Esports series, and we had James Baldwin win one of the seasons, and we took him off to Manicourt to do the Alpine GT4 track day experience, which was the grand prize for the competition. And James was like, and James is a phenomenal driver in real cars, right? But he hasn't done it that often. He hasn't been racing every weekend. He's done a couple of track days, a couple of experiences. I think he's doing a bit more now that he's been with Mercedes for 2 years. But he was jumping in that A110, and he was producing lap times like comparable to the rest of the grid when they raced there the year before. I think his fastest lap ended up being something like half a second off pole for that weekend, the season or so before, which is just incredible to think of, because he doesn't have that repeat exposure of that car or that track, etc. But they knew, he knew the track, he knew Manicourt, having never set foot on it, because he raced it on sims. He'd been playing it on iRacing or whatever. He knew where he was supposed to brake. He knew where the corners were. He knew what the angles were. And it only took him a couple of laps to actually be like, oh, okay, so it's slightly different from the game, but not that different. He only is having to make slight adjustments. Whereas you put an F1 driver on a brand new circuit, they're having to figure out exactly where all these points are, or you put anyone on any new sort of track, etc., you'd have to learn it. So the fact that he was able to get that understanding digitally before even appearing, I think is phenomenal. And I think that's the opportunity that we're going to see more and more of, especially as brands, F1 teams, car manufacturers become more and more aware of sim racing and get more and more involved. We're going to see more of those stories of drivers jumping across the reality wall and doing real racing and digital racing sort of side by side.
I absolutely love that, Matt, and you've explained it so well. And I think even more on top of just the driving side, you touched on obviously drivers and how they can improve and where they've come, giving great examples. Again, the sponsorship, partnership sides, where I know both of us are really passionate about, and I know Hannah as well has done a hell of a lot within partnerships. But I mean, again, even exposing people to that mechanical engineering background, the careers that can come from esports and sim racing, even without necessarily having a university background, etc. There's so many opportunities there, so much experience you can gain from different sectors. Social media is a big one. I mean, I think it was something like 96% of all kids in the UK aged from 6 to 18 are involved in gaming, whether watching or playing. You think 96% of all kids of between those ages is unbelievable. And, I speak to business owners and I say, what does your kid do? And they go, well, they're just on like YouTube or watch something. And again, they probably don't know the difference between, or they might not know the difference between YouTube, Twitch, and all these other different platforms. But again, it's like, yeah, they don't watch TV like we used to. They're watching someone else stream, like someone else playing a game, and it's crazy.
And I think that gives real opportunity, because I grew up in an F1 house. My dad is a massive F1 fan. His dad was an F1 fan. We'd watch it every weekend. We'd watch, and we'd support whoever, whether the team is. And my dad didn't really understand esports until it entered the space of F1. Until, my dad, bless him, he was sending me links to things, 6 months, 12 months out of date articles about F1 esports. But he was sending them and he was talking to me about it. And suddenly he had this sort of awakening or understanding, this realization that actually, hey, sim racing is a lot like what I'm already interested in. And again, I think COVID did a lot to do that. I remember being in a pub, back when you couldn't sit next to your friend, you had to sort of wave at them from across the bar and whatever. But we were in a pub, and they had the sim racing on the TV. They had Sky F1 broadcasting the third round of the whatever it was virtual Grand Prix, and I remember being sat there with my mate, and we were just chatting whatever, and I could hear a bloke at the bar looking at the TV going, I don't know any of these names. I don't, what is this He was very confused, because from his perspective, and maybe he needed glasses, I don't know, but what was happening on that screen was almost identical to what happened on a Grand Prix Sunday, that he couldn't actually tell the difference. He was like, but it's not Sunday. Why is F1 on a Wednesday afternoon? And it was sort of eye-opening to realize that actually, as more and more traditional sports embrace esports, there becomes that understanding, that cross-platforming, that cross-generational gap, right? Because it's very easy to see a kid sat at home playing games, and the parents say, oh, you should be out outside playing football, or you should be reading a book, you should be doing something productive. Well, that is productive. They're developing cognitive skills, they're developing social skills, team play, teamwork, coordination, hand-eye coordination. They're understanding how these things work. This is going to sound terrible, I remember more maths from RuneScape than I do from any of my math lessons in school, right? Because you had to go and sell everything and do all the calculations. How much experience do I need from this creature today? And I used to work it out with a pen and paper, because I didn't have a calculator or whatever to hand, and I just did that. And that was how I became passionate about those things. And you touch on it, things like social media, it exposes us to so many fantastic things. You get to see parts of the world that you would never have even imagined. I sit there and I watch people do snowboarding videos, and I think, I'm looking at flights to go. When's the cheapest I can go throw myself off a mountain and learn how to snowboard, or ride a horse. I mean, I don't want to ride a horse, but those sort of things, right? And it's no different. Kids that sit there and watch someone sim racing or go, oh, Dad, can we go karting? Or, oh, Mum, can we go? Can we try this? Or F1 arcade, right? That's a good example. You walk past it. And look, I'm not gonna sit here and say F1 arcade is the pinnacle of sim racing, because it's not, and that's not what it's designed for. It's arcade. It's there to be enjoyed. But these young kids will walk past that on the high street and go, "What's going on in there? There's all these flashing lights. There's all this excitement." They go in and just embrace the culture. They might not particularly care that it's F1 branded. They might not care whether it's Lewis or Charles or Max that they're driving as. They might not care. They're just there for the enjoyment and the experience. They're there with their friends, etc. But that grows, and that's where the passion comes from, right? And that's where people start getting jobs for these things. How many people grew up watching the space launches and said, I want to be an astronaut? And hey, maybe they never went into being an astronaut, but maybe they went down more STEM topics, or maybe they, became more sort of aware of physics and the world around you. And I think, I don't want this to turn like this. Starting to sound sort of too philosophical and a little bit sort of not quite preachy, but we open ourselves up to being capable of doing so much more when we just embrace hobbies and passions, and rather than stamping on those sort of passions. Kids out there that are playing games, well, hey, look, embrace them, talk to them, learn out what they're learning, understand why they enjoy it, what is it that about it that they're passionate about. Yes, it's not good to sit there for 8 hours. As a gamer, if I have a spare Sunday and I've spent 8 hours playing a game, I feel bad, because I'm like, I shouldn't have done that. I should have gone out and got some exercise, or I should have wash the dishes or put on some, but it's about moderation, right? And anything in moderation is good for you. You need to just embrace what you're passionate about. So that's my, I guess, bottom line. I don't really know, but it's always, I've had opportunities to talk to so many parents at events and at conferences and whatever, and that's always their main concern is, oh, well, they play for hours. I'm like, well, that's fine. Like, a couple hours is fine. Don't do it all day. And embrace their passion. If they're into gaming, go to one of the massive gaming events we have all around the UK. Take them to experience it in person. Funny enough, if you're walking around a conference hall, that is the same as walking outside. Or if you're going to the shops or going to wherever, I would much rather as a kid have walked around a conference hall full of gaming stuff than been dragged to the shopping centre with my parents. It's about embracing passion. It's about enjoying what people are passionate about and enthusiastic about, and really just helping that talent develop, right? Because that's how people get jobs in this industry. That's how the industry continues to thrive and grow, and that's how we get a more sort of happy, enjoyable world.
Matt, I love that. And we are so philosophical anyway. So, we talk about all different sorts of stuff in regards to how we can better ourselves as people. And, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Do what you're passionate about. It's exactly what I do. And I've created myself my own business from doing that. Hannah, again, has created her own businesses from following her passion. It sounds like you're going down that route anyway now, and we haven't even talked. I think we need another podcast episode just to touch on everything that you're going to do in the future as well. But I'm conscious of time, and one thing we always sort of finish on it, and we've got this question, and I say we always finish on. We've only had 2 episodes so far, and obviously you're the third, so we're going to continue with this trade. But if there was anyone that you could spend an hour with, either alive or dead, who would it be?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. Anyone? Oh, see, I don't know. I don't know. That's a really tough question because I have this is again maybe slightly off topic. I have so many passions as an individual. I love music. I love obviously esports, F1. And I've also had the privilege of meeting some fantastic people in that industry, in those industries. From famous musicians, famous drivers. So I'm already sitting at a fairly privileged position when I can sort of talk about this sort of thing. So I think I'd have to pick someone like really sort of iconic, maybe go back and speak to like Plato or Aristotle or Dante. I think that would be for me quite a language barrier aside. I'm assuming in this world that I can suddenly speak fluent Latin or Greek or whatever. Yes. But yeah, I think just I think experiencing that world would be phenomenal. Some sort of ancient philosopher or could you imagine trying to show someone like Da Vinci the world of gaming and computers, that would absolutely blow their minds. But I also think they'd understand it to a sort of finite degree of like, oh, actually, there's a logical next step here. I think, for me, that'd be really interesting. And, I don't want to like sort of, expose myself as being sort of like I'd really want to speak to, I don't know, just fascinating people from history, right? We remember them and we learn about them because they were so influential at the time and so poignant when it came to the concepts of the world, concepts that are still relevant to us now, right? I think that's fundamental to human sort of existence and society is how we have been, sort of born from our ancestors and how the world develops and grows. I think it's really important to remember that actually, maybe we're not as sophisticated or maybe we're not as smart now as they were, or I think it's fairly ignorant maybe to assume that we're better off or we're smarter than some of these people that did experience a different world, but they experienced it the same way we experience our world. And so I don't know, I didn't actually give a specific person, but I think sort of in that range, those sorts of people would be where I'd want to spend an afternoon.
That's fantastic.
So cool. Yeah, I picked Marcus Aurelius. So
there you go. Yeah. Absolutely. I was thinking of Hannibal, but then I thought that might be, he's a bit sort of warmongering, but then very, but then saved Rome, but then got Carthage salted, and then you sort of think, well, maybe someone like Genghis Khan would just to get a step into their mind, would be really curious. Sun Tzu could be another one. Confucius again, presuming I can just suddenly speak ancient Chinese. But yeah, I think, and like how incredible is that, right? So, and this is a complete diversion, and I'm sorry if this is going to extend the podcast. Sun Tzu wrote this incredible document, The Art of War, and it has existed for thousands of years, and yet you can jump onto any Command and Conquer, StarCraft, League of Legends, Call of Duty, CSGO, and you can apply the same military strategies and concepts written about by someone thousands of years ago, and you can apply them to something that we've created in the modern era. And I think that is just phenomenal, right? And we talk about strategy when it comes to F1 or motorsports. How much fuel do you need to complete a certain amount of laps? Or actually, we saw it loads last year, right? Like with the DRS overtaking. How incredible was it to see drivers calculating at the pinnacle of F1 at top speeds of 200 miles an hour, swapping back and forth down a straight just to get DRS for the next 3 corners. And I think that's for me is like, that again is just a real good showcase of how we as a society, we as a people are still so connected to our ancestors. There's this strategical thinking of, how do you take down a woolly mammoth? Well, it's the same way that you take down your rival in F1, or it's the same way you cross how do we cross a desert 4,000 years ago? Well, it's the same way we cross it now in Extreme E or in the Paris-Dakar or whatever. So I feel like I've turned this into more of a philosophy podcast than a sort of series.
It's what it's all about. At the end of the day, we're here to educate people, half on like racing drivers, and the other half on business, motorsport, things loosely related to motorsports. We don't even have to be closely related. It's just like some sort of loose. It's our passion. That's what brought us together. But that's the thing is that actually there is so much out in the world here that people can be educated on, and that's what we want to bring them. So Matt, I'm conscious of time. We
Sorry.
Take up half an hour of your time. It's now 40 minutes. But
no, it's fine. It's fine.
Thank you so much for jumping on. It's been an absolute pleasure. And what we'll do is, obviously people who want to find out more about you and what you do, we'll put your social links in the description so people can reach out to you.
LinkedIn's the best one for me. If anyone has any questions or curious to know a little bit more about myself, please reach out to there. More than happy to entertain a conversation with anyone. Anyone who wants to talk business or just ask me more questions about my weird world and love of philosophy or music or IET1 is the best League of Legends team in the world. That's it.
Amazing.
Smashing. Thank you so much. Look after yourselves, and to our listeners, we'll see you on the next podcast. Take care.
All the best.